Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Old Doghouse Logistics Podcast. I am your co-host, the Bodacious Cowboy. Alongside is my other co-host, Mr. John Brewer. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well for a Friday. How are you?
I am hunky dory, man. It's been a long week, as we were discussing earlier. It's just one of those weeks that happen in logistics. You can't get away in this business without getting blindsided. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to get a little into the various operational internal issues that we faced. We talked about inbound logistics last week. We touched a little bit on that, and so you know what are your feelings? We're talking about pitch slapping. I have to say that pitch slapping and cold calling and how important reverse logistics is in the inbound logistics to different animals, whether it's being fed by a supplier, manufacturer, vendor that's coming inbound, either to be kitted, reworked, or whatever, and sent back out. There is a method to the madness, and it's so important that as a broker that you understand the intricacies of that operation and some of the questions that you should be asking, especially if that's your niche, if you're into inbound logistics, reverse logistics, etc. What are your thoughts on that, John, as far as some of the calls that you've received over the years, and how you were able to fend them off and help people?
That's a very good question. And yeah, I've taken my share. I have this running joke that if somebody is pitch slapping me, I get a cold call, a cold email, and a cold LinkedIn invite, not necessarily in that order.
Right.
So a lot of those I don't even respond to because mainly if I did, I wouldn't get any work done. The magnitude is just so great of those coming in. So I'm looking, again, I'm always going to preach that this is a relational business.
Yeah.
It's not what you know, it's who you know, and building those relationships is key. And to that point, I think you mentioned more than once that you don't do cold calls, and I think the relationships you build allow you to do that and still be successful. So I would rather have a relationship with somebody than just get a cold call. And if you don't, in this day and age with media being what it is, if you don't do your research on your prospect, then you're shooting yourself in the foot before you ever dial the number. So I think I might have mentioned that I had another joke where when I had worked at a corporate office in Memphis, Tennessee, and I get cold calls, and the guy would start talking. He goes, "Man, I got trucks in Memphis every day," and I'm like, "Well, good for you." My nearest DC is in Chicago, so do your research. I mean, try to get something. I mean, you can always jump on the customer's website. You can figure out things. There's a lot of information out there, and I liken it to interviewing for a job. Anybody who's worth their salt interviewing for a job is going to go do the research. So when they sit down to interview, they're confident, number one. And
Yeah.
number two, they show that they have an interest in whatever that position is. What we're talking about here, the position is hauling my freight. So I think if you follow that same interview process for cold calling, cold prospecting, I think it will give you a leg up just rather than somebody just doing a spray and pray or dialing for dollars.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. You know, the way that I sorry about that. The way that I see it is that you want it like the roll off your tongue with ease. And the only way that happens, John, is if you know your niche in the vertical and the way the operation is. It's just like going to a bar, sitting down to have a cocktail, and you spark up a conversation. It just like that ease. You don't have to think about it, or how am I going to come across. How you doing, man? Where you from? Something like that. I mean, just really easy to open up the conversation. Next thing, one thing leads to another, and it's that buildup. It's that buildup of having the knowledge and asking the right question at the right time. And I know this is as a fact, John, and maybe you can relate to it. But what I found out, working on your side of the business, is that the less the transportation spend that you have, the less amount of calls that you're going to receive in a week's time, because
Right.
they know it that, well, he's not a big shipper. He's here and there. It's not consistent, etc. But when you start running up into like, you know, 10 million, 20, $100 million worth of spend, everybody comes out of the woodwork and calls you up. I was getting at one time, John, 35 calls a day. It was
Yep.
everybody wanted a piece of the pie. It just goes with the territory,
Yep.
but with the territory, the way that I've looked at it is that the higher the more complex the operation, the smarter the traffic manager, the supply chain manager, or the logistics manager is. They're like rocket scientists. You really got to know your game if you're going to talk, smack with them and have a shot. You have to do the research that John was talking about. It's not as simple as making a phone call and hoping that something's going to come out of it. You really got to get underneath the weeds, man, and go to the root. You know, what are the possibilities he's going to have this problem or she's going to have this problem? Is it relatable to their business, etc.? The only way that you do that is digging in, man. Look up the company, look at, do the research, find out where their facilities are, who's in charge, what they do. There's so much information on the net that we didn't have when we started.
No,
That's why we call
we
it
didn't have it.
old dogs logistics, man. What we had was a newspaper. You can look things up that way. I mean, we had the Rolodexs. I mean, we're going real old dog here, but that's what it was back then. And all the tools, yeah, we survived. We survived that part
Right.
of that. But now with all the tools, I just don't understand, John, why people aren't, you know, gravitating towards those tools to really use them and get that information that's so critical to their success, especially as a salesperson. If you're a commission guy, everything relies on your ability to sell your service, yourself, your niche, the vertical that you want to work in. The only way that you're able to do that is gaining that knowledge.
Well, and to that point, Jeff, I think we live in what I call a text environment or a text culture.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is we're looking for that short, quick response. And when we start talking about doing research on a prospect, that's going to take a little bit. I mean, even with the internet, I mean, it's still faster than it was when you and I were, starting out. But nevertheless, it's not a text type operation. It's not a text function.
Right.
And a lot of that, the other piece of that with everybody kind of being trained by basically your cell phone, because we're all trained by our cell phones. People want that quick hit, and the sad thing is you lose critical thinking with that as well, because critical thinking, you have to ask why 5 separate times, and that's
Right.
going to take some time. And people don't want to invest that kind of time in it. And I'm like you, Jeff. If you're straight commission sales, I would be, you need to make the money, and this is what it's going to take to be successful. Then that's what you need to do. And if it takes a little longer than sending a text message, then so be it. That's the world you live in. So,
yeah, but John, this isn't personal. It's not personable.
no, it's not. It's not personal.
Hey, listen, this is a great tool, but it's actually not very beneficial because people rely on this way, way too much. And the thing is that, how did we do business back in the day? It's almost like if you took that where we had to work real hard. I mean, when you think about it, This is not hard. When we didn't have that, that was hard because we had to find other ways of communicating, of doing that research. We had to go to libraries. We had to look at different kinds of stuff that you just don't, this generation doesn't do that right now. They're under extreme they're under such extreme pressures day in and day out, the quotas that need to be met on on a weekly basis, which and I always say this, and whether people like it or not, my integrity and honesty is first and foremost. I say it all the time. I don't really care, but I think quotas suck because when you don't train your people correctly, you got your brand that's out there on risk. Your image,
Absolutely.
your personal reputation. That you either know your business or you don't know the business, and if you don't know the business, the word's going to get out there. But they don't really think about that kind of stuff, John. They
Yeah.
they really don't. It's just like, I got to make 50 phone calls today. I got to do 250 at the end of this week. I got to do 1,000. I get it. And then I mean, we're going to be talking about this for weeks, but a lot of people in this environment, in this economy, they're going to do desperate things. They're
Yep.
going to do desperate things. And that's where fraudulent activity comes in, double brokering, and people getting paid under the table to do unethical things. I mean, you name it, it is definitely happening out there. And it's not the way to do business. If you want a career in logistics, you're going to have to work your ass off. And part of that is doing homework and research if you want to be successful.
Yeah.
You have to dig in.
Any company you have out there that's focusing on quantity versus quality, it's going to reflect in all areas of their business. It's going to reflect in their operations. It's going to reflect in their service levels. It's going to reflect I would even go so far to say it's going to reflect in their pricing, because if you're running through something and you're trying to get that rate out as quickly as you possibly can, you're going to make a mistake. And then you got to go back to your customer and say, hey, we didn't figure it right, or hey, we didn't take this into consideration when we were quoting you, and
You
now
don't want to hear that.
we need $500 more, and I'm looking at you like you don't know how to manage your business, and I don't need to be partnered with you.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to hear that as a customer or a client. A customer and a client are two different things in my books. I don't know how you see it, but a customer is a business that's a hit or miss, comes and goes, infrequent. A client is someone that relies on you heavily, that's always constantly giving you business every single week. Those are two entirely different things, the way I look at it. You can either be a customer or a client. I go after clients. Other people are on the spot market and go after customers. It all depends on the model. And with the model, you have that pressure because you got to feed that pipeline. You've got to get that revenue flow. Just as much as you need to reduce costs, brokers need to increase margins. That's how they survive, but there's got to be a fine balance to that.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's I never thought about client versus customer, but you make an absolute great point. It's relational versus transactional, and I'm a lot like you. I want clients for partners. I want the ones that, if I take another position at another organization, that I can pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I need my A string. And I think I mentioned it probably earlier in one of our casts. You got to protect. Everybody's got to protect their brand. Okay,
Absolutely.
Even individuals such as you, such as I, we have a brand, and if you work with those transactional operations, sooner or later they're going to let you down, and your leadership is going to look at you saying, hey, wait a minute, we hired you to be an expert in this area.
Right.
Why are you letting us down? Why are you letting our customers down? And that's a ding to your own personal brand.
Correct.
I don't want leadership questioning anything I propose, because I'm not going to propose something that's silly or it's naive or anything like that. I'm going to give you the best answer I can based on my experience and my knowledge. And you want to be that subject matter expert for them. You want to be, hey, this is my distribution guy. He's the one
Mhm.
who's going to take care of it. I let him do his thing, and he goes off and does it and takes care of it, and I don't have to worry about it because I'm not as strong in distribution as he is because he's got 3 decades worth of knowledge.
Right. But you also want to partner with somebody that's going to put feathers in your cap.
Absolutely.
Like the way I look at it is, look, I'm here to help you to be better than who you are. I don't need the recognition. If you want to take the recognition and saying, I'm the one that put this play in place and look what it's done for me. That means that we're going to build a better relationship then, because I'm going to I'm going to count on you as much as you're going to count on me. And that's how you build those relationships, by telling people, like, we have that relationship, even though I don't do business with you, but you'll tell me the way it is, whether I'm going to like it or not. But at the end of the day, we're going to agree to, we're going to agree to disagree and still be friends. That's the same kind of relationship that's authentic when a service provider has that relationship with a customer and they're trying to build that long-term business relationship. That's the congruency that you need to get to, that you have to thrive for. Because my philosophy in it, John, and I know you know this, is that I look for a status of client for life. I would rather service the hell out of a client and make sure that they're happy than lose a client and try to find a replacement. It's very costly, and it's very costly for you as well when you have to reinvent the wheel, especially if you're running a big DC and you've got all these things going on logistically, that you're looking for a partner that can take a lot of that paperwork off your desk to give you some breathing room so that you can prioritize your stuff that's happening internally, especially if you have different facilities and all of that. And so by having that relationship and being able to talk and say the things that are, that you want to hear and that you don't want to hear is very important.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, building that client relationship for life, that earns you a seat at the table, and that earns you a platform that you can speak freely with your customer. And again, to your point, that you both may agree to disagree, but you have that, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be one-sided.
No.
And you've earned that right, with your knowledge and your skills, and with your service level, that all the operations, all that kicking butt and working your ass off.
Yeah.
So that customer respects you enough that they're going to listen to what you have to say. Now, they may not agree with it, but
No.
they're not going to shut the door in your face either. And they're not going to say, okay, just because I disagree with you, or just because I don't think you know what you're talking about, we're never going to do business again. So
Right.
that's what weathers those storms out there in supply chain. And we all know they're out there, even, not just the day-to-day ops, but just, the rise and fall of the market and everything else. You need somebody out there. I always say, we're all walking through the valley of the shadow of death. We might as well be holding hands.
Exactly.
Because
No,
I mean,
exactly.
we're all in the same spot. It may impact us differently, but we're all in the same spot. And if we don't work together, nobody's going to come save us, because we're the people who come out and save others.
Very, very true. And the other thing too is that, you need to have justifiable reasons for when increases are going to take place. Screw up all the time, forget about asking for an increase. Prove your point, show that you're touching, on all critical points that hopefully you're discussing with your service provider. Here are my requirements. Here are my expectations. You talked about net and gross as far as on-time delivery performance. I believe it was last week, where you had, a net of like 94%, gross of 98%, because what you'll do on the net is taking in all the acceptable reasons why a shipment didn't, exceptions to rule That is that why a shipment didn't arrive. And then in a perfect environment, here's what I expect.
Yeah.
Those are the type of things that you have to have a conversation with, so that there's no surprises. We discussed this, and I always said this before too, was that as a shipper, I always gave an equal opportunity to both my carriers and my brokers to fire themselves.
Yep.
That's why I didn't have any stress. I know it's hard to believe, working in logistics for all these years, but you're talking about the controllable and the uncontrollable things that you shouldn't
Right.
really worry about. The controllable things is when you talk to your service providers. And if you're a service provider talking to your client, you need to write these things out. So, it's defined. The purpose and the reasons are defined.
Yeah.
Here's what I need you to do. Here's what I need you to do. Is it possible? And you start working out all these things. Next thing you know, if you're a big shipper, dedicated and stuff, you start writing, all these bullet points down, so that when you have your QBRs or whatever, and you're going to sit down with him, you can start going back to what was discussed. If you're doing quarterly or whatever, and start defining that. Here's the requirements that I needed you to do. Oh, here you go, John. Here I've got the data here. That there was lateness on your side, there was lateness on our side. And you look for the wash things. You talked about equal equal distribution on problem areas. If one hand washes the other, you get to the final goal and objective that both of you are trying to reach for. But if you just steadfast and you're saying, no, I was right, you were wrong, and take that kind of position, things are going to go astray real fast.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of those, a prime example of the controllable versus uncontrollable. This is an actual real life example. So one of my KPIs was order accuracy. Did the end customer get what they ordered?
Right.
And I actually had a distributor. So when one of our vendors shorted the distributor and he was out of product, he counted that, he dinged himself for that on the order accuracy. And I'm like, well, you can't control that.
Right.
So why are you counting it against you? He could never hit the level of what the KPI was at, because we had him at a certain percentage. He had to have order accuracy 2, and the vendors shortened him on the inbound. He was pinging himself, and I said, dude, don't do that. If you can't control it, don't do it, because I have no right to hold you accountable for anything you cannot control.
Right. And that would, what, that also can relate to claims.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well.
It relates to everything: on-time service, order accuracy, claims, anything out there, because we are dealing with on this little blue marble, and things happen. So yes. I mean, I can tell you, every hurricane season, I'm sitting here with the hair on the back of my neck standing up, because I've got my customers are all up along the eastern seaboard. So I'm watching the weather. I'm watching the wildfires out on the West Coast. I'm watching the tornadoes, and winter has its own problems. So I'm already watching all that stuff. And don't ding yourself. That's when you have to really work with your carriers and your brokers, because driver safety actually comes into play with that as well.
Yes.
You don't want your driver out there with 60, 70 mile an hour winds in a truck. Or you don't want them, going through a pass in Oregon with the snow 20 feet high. So you have to kind of work with that. You have to be a little flexible. Can I delay that shipment, 24 hours? Can I move that shipment up 24 hours? Can I ship it early before the hurricane hits, so we get the truck out of there?
And that that comes with communication.
Absolutely.
Right? Your service provider should be telling you that, and vice versa. Like somebody you do business with, a vendor, dealer, whatever, gives you a call and saying, hey, John, we're going to have a big problem up here. It's going to be rolling in. Then I would expect, communication from you saying, hey, you may not know this, but they have a problem up there, or the highway is shut down. I know you're coming in to pick it up and ask, I want to give you this, and vice versa. I mean, it's just like that communication that needs to be had.
Yep, absolutely. And that that's a major part of that relational thing too. You can have those conversations, and you're not only just, the shipper's not just thinking about the shipper's thinking about his partners who move the freight as well, and vice versa. So that if you do see something like that, you can raise that flag and you say, hey, we're going to be proactive with this. We're going to push this shipment up 24 hours before the hurricane hits the beach, and get that driver out of there and get my delivery done and get your driver to safety out of the storm's way. And that's that relationship. I'm not just thinking about, my end customers or my DCs or anything like that. I'm thinking about everybody that's involved within my supply chain, and how this is going to impact them. And that's when you do that proactive communication with them, and you say, hey, this is coming up. We're going to have to do something and figure it out. Because like I said, stuff happens
every day.
Every day.
Every day. We're talking about like claims earlier, and I'll give you something that you may or may not have thought of, that will save a lot of money. Now, depending upon what type of material that you're shipping, claims accounts for a lot of SG&A cost. The mitigation, the exposure, the length of time to resolve your claims and stuff. Now, when I was managing multi-million-dollar operation, I did claims concessions. And what I did on that was that I negotiated, and I had the justification for it, for visible damage and concealed damage. And you didn't know it because it's packaged good and it came from your manufacturer, and maybe something happened where they put a right part in a left bag or something like that. I mean, some stupid stuff that happens when manufacturing are happening and they're changing from one model to a next, from a right handle to a left handle, but they're still using right handle bags, as an example, whatever. So obviously they ordered the right part, but they had the right bag, wrong part, kind of. So there's a claim against it. There's transportation costs that you can also mitigate and get that back as part of that. But I did claim concessions for one reason. How much do you think that it costs to actually pay a claims expert or mitigator to go through that claim per hour? What are your thoughts?
$50 an hour?
Yeah, if not more, when you have all these different touch points, right, phone calls and all this kind of stuff. So what I said was, listen, anything that was $100 claim, put it right through. And here's the reason why. It's going to cost you more money to mitigate this on SG&A costs. It's going to be an hour on my side as a shipper. It's going to be another hour on your side, if not more, as a carrier service provider, to put that. When you add up the amount of money that is spent processing it, it's going to cost you more than just paying it outright. Just pay it outright, up to $100,000 or maybe $250,000, whatever you want to decide on that. And when you go back to it and they look at, it is costing a lot, to do this, because sometimes on the concealed damage side of that business, you may not find out for a few months. You might be restocking merchandise, and you've got it on the third tier of your a rack system in your warehouse, and you pick from the bottom up. And then all of a sudden, as you're dropping it down, you may not get that for 2 months. And all of a sudden you open up the box and there's a claim in there because it's concealed. You didn't know it, and it's all these different kinds of things that should be taken into consideration if you know it and you're talking to, a shipper, giving those type of things that he or she may not even think about to reduce their costs, because there's so many internal things in an operation that they don't consider that will put them in a better position to serve their client or customer, whoever it might be, by understanding and knowing that kind of stuff. But that stuff's not learned like overnight.
Absolutely. And that's Jeff, that's a prime example of, I view these relationships as partnerships, and shippers can do things behind the scenes. They can flip levers and push buttons, and they can drive cost out of a carrier's bottom line. So that increases margin. Whenever you drive out, you either lower your cost or you raise your margin, raise your price, and that's what's going to move the margin. I would rather drive cost out of it, drive the fat out of it, than take an increase. So, I sit down with my carriers and my brokers, and I say, okay, where are we messing up? And they'll, well, you're sitting us here too long, or to your point, why are we processing $100 claim? But you're always looking, to drive cost out of your own system, but you also want to help your partners drive it out of theirs too, because everything gets better. If I'm holding your truck up, not only is that additional cost, but that starts to impact service as well. And if I can get, you in and out of the dock in, an hour and a half or whatever versus 6, then everybody wins, including the end customer.
And you know what? That makes me laugh. And I won't name the customer. I don't name companies here. It's irrelevant. But when you sit down with your service providers, and you tell them, "Oh yeah, no problem. You know what? We load, to your point, we can load you up in an hour and a half. Because you're looking for an hour and a half. That's good. Yeah, we can shave our rates down and everything, but you're bullshitting them. That you are not going to be able to load that up in an hour and a half, right? And then I ask my drivers, and I've done it a lot. Hey, listen, you're my eyes. You're there. Walk into the warehouse, take a snapshot of that dock. I want to see what that dock looks like. And I can do many things with pictures because I've worked in that side. I can see a lot of things that a lot of other people don't know what to look for, and ask those whys, like you said. The old adage: if you ask why 5 times, you'll get the answer of why.
You get the answer. That's exactly right.
Exactly. And so I can. That's why I say my service level. I find hidden bank opportunities that cost me absolutely nothing, that save my clients a shitload of money, because it's things that they don't think about. They don't have that second or third eye on their operation that they never thought of. That could speed up the process from to pick, to stage, to load. And then the ripple effect that happens when it's not done right, and scheduling and all this other kinds of stuff to speed up the process. Because if I can put more money back in your pocket, I'm going to most likely get more business from you, because I'm solidifying that relationship. I just gave you a bone to chew on that's going to put more money back to your bottom line. And as a service provider, that's what you are paying me to do. That's exactly what you're paying me to do, not just to move freight. A lot of people just say, you know what? You're paying me. You're just, I'm paying you to move freight. No, it's much more than that. It's like I said, customer here today, gone tomorrow. There's not much to do in there. They're in a bind. They can't find a carrier, whatever. So their last result is calling up a broker to move their freight because they have the one-offs. Go for it, take it. And if I have another shipment or whatever, one-off, I'll see you in a couple months, or whatever it might be. Dedicated is a much different kind of thing. But that's how you build those kind of relationships, especially if you gain that knowledge. I say it all the time, John. You heard me say it that when you work for a brokerage, I think part of their training, they should have a relationship with a distribution center or warehouse that maybe they're doing business with that says, hey, I got a new associate that's coming on board. I want them to get a better perspective of seeing your operation. Can they be an intern for the day? And can I send them over, or can I send her over so that they can get a visual on the office, what things are happening in the office, what's happening on the dock, in the warehouse, in the different departments out there, the claim department, freight payment. I mean, just all those kind of different things. Right. Then they understand the complexity of it, because it's so complex, logistics operations compared to just moving freight. Moving freight, easy part.
Yeah, that's the easy part. It's when it doesn't move is when it gets hard.
and why does that happen? That's where all the money is. Yep. That's where all the money is. That found hidden bank that I speak of and have spoken about for years, that I believe in, because I've seen it. And that's, to your point, gaining that knowledge and all of that kind of stuff really will help you to get to where you need to be and be able to ask those questions. Now, and I also said it too, is that, look, you and I are not experts. I really hate that word experts, because if you're an expert, that means you're a know-it-all, and that, you have the answers to everything. I don't have all the answers to everything. You don't have all the answers to everything.
I don't have them.
Right. And so what's going to happen, because I know you well, if you don't know the answer to a question, you're sure hell is going to look into it and find out and get back to a person and saying, hey, I know we had this conversation. I couldn't answer it, but this is what I found out. I hope it helps out. Because that's what you and I do. We help other people out.
What's that word we're looking for again? What was that? Research.
Research. Yeah. That's the,
yeah. It happens on all sides of the fence. I can tell you an example. When I first got into this industry, I was a short haul dispatcher for an asset player, and they had a pretty liberal rider policy. Basically, you sign your name on the line and you could go ride in the truck with whoever the driver is. And I wrote, I wanted to understand what they were going through on that other side of the phone.
What made you do that?
I just wanted to understand. I mean, I talked to them on the phone all the time. We were one of the few players out there that actually had Qualcomm satellite text back and forth way back when. And I just wanted to see what they went through. And I was actually, my shift was Sunday through Thursday. So Thursday night I'd ride out, and it was short haul. So we'd be back, worst case, Saturday afternoon.
Right.
And I would go out with them. And if it was back then, some of the loads were driver unload, and they paid them by the piece. And I would help them unload the truck. I didn't make a dime off of it. The company didn't pay me, but the knowledge and the experience paid off in spades all throughout my career. Because, even when I'd go out on the dock and the drivers would be sitting there waiting to get loaded, I could talk to them and say, I could understand what they were dealing with, especially when it came to hours of service. And this was before, the clock constantly stayed on. But, understanding what, the hours of service and how a shipper's delay can cause a huge ripple that'll start as a ripple in the pond and be a tsunami at the end. And understanding that, and understanding how to mitigate that and make it go away so that it doesn't become an issue. Now, you're not going to perform that consistently time after time, but the more you can do that, you're going to be what we call a shipper of choice in action and word, not just word only.
Right.
If your drivers are happy, the drivers picking up your loads are happy, then you're pretty much solidified as that carrier is going to stay with you, because they want their drivers happy. The driver retention has been a nightmare for years. And getting those good quality drivers who can actually pass a drug test is next to impossible. So, if your drivers are happy, then they're gonna keep wanting to do business with you, and that's going to give you sustainability in the capacity situation there, and it's going to help. And that's just taking care of the nuts and bolts, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It's very simple acts that can have a profound ripple, positive or negative, in your supply chain. And the more you do to mitigate those, and like I said, drive that cost out, drive the time out, drive all that out, the better the benefits are worth 10 times more than the problems.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Back in the day, myself, and I say this kiddingly, because I hear the word collaboration all the time now, and I'm happy that it's being spoken. And I kid and I say, well, back in the day when you look up collaboration in a dictionary, my picture was underneath it because I knew how important that was to collaborate with all key entities, key stakeholders,
That's
whether
right.
internalized or externalized, and that include not just the asset company, service provider that you were doing business with, but also the drivers. And so what I used to do, and I did it all the time, was you mentioned driver unload, driver load. That was an accessorial back then, and I would bring my jeans and a T-shirt at the end of the month because we had to make budget and we had to get everything out at the end of the thing. I would jump into the truck and help the driver load his truck. I was not afraid to do that. I was always in the trenches because I was not a follower. I was a leader. And if I could do it, everybody else could do it too. And they would jump into it and we would expedite and get things out much quicker when I got involved. And you heard the old thing saying, when the cat's not there, the mice will play, But the thing is to get them over it, I would never ask somebody to do something I have never done.
That's right.
Which I did, and by doing that in the trenches, understanding how these boxes are laid out, how you cube out trailers, what's the most efficient way, even from driving forklifts and stocking shelves and picking orders and kitting, and streamlining activities. I was involved in all that kind of stuff. And I know you got dirty in that area as well. And it's such a great learning experience. And that's what's missing today. There's a lot of standoffish kind of operations manager that would rather stay in their office and let their employees do it rather than get involved and see what's actually happening on the floor, to see if it's efficient, if they know what efficiency is and how to eliminate waste.
We had a term for that coming up through the ranks. We called it MBWA, management by walking around.
Yeah.
I would hit that floor every day, multiple times a day. I'd hit the floor. I'd get out there. I'd talk to the employees, building those relationships, getting their insights. Because if you want to learn how to do something, ask the person who's getting their hands dirty, because
or getting their ass
they know
kicked.
how to do it, and they're going to have they're going to have some damn good solutions to whatever the challenges are. So you can.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You said that you got into a truck and went out, did deliveries and all that kind of stuff. I did the same thing when I was at Ford Motor Company, and we were running 48 dedicated fleets every single day, doing multi-stops, anywhere between 15 to 22 stops a day. You could just imagine the complexity and everything that was going out on a daily basis, whether they were vehicle off the road kind of things, interim orders, which were the LTL orders. And then we had the stock orders, which was the full truckloads that were going out. And I used to design routes. I remember going out into Chicago when we first opened an HVC out there. And I tagged along with a pup driver with a lift gate on it. And here I am. I forgot what highway I was on in the middle of a snowstorm underneath the pup, trying to help the driver fix the lift gate, and getting in there and understanding what the driver was doing, and then following them and doing the hub and spoke operation for the whole night, overnight. I from the time they picked it up to the time they dropped the pup off at a domicile, which was at a diner, to the time that the milk run guy would come in there and pick up that pup and do the final deliveries, and everything that driver did, I measured and I monitored, and I squeezed out a ton of freaking waste, because I knew that it should have taken X time and it was taking Y time. And why did these things happen? And why was the driver sitting at Dunkin' Donuts for gazillion amount of time when he should have been out there? You get to understand this kind of stuff by getting involved, not sitting behind and following others, but leading other people to be better than who he or she is. And so that's why, I'm so adamant on it, whether you agree or disagree with me. I'm telling you, there's no other type of education than street smarts and getting out there and doing it and understanding it firsthand. And when you're able to understand how to eliminate waste, you're saving your clients a ton of freaking money. But it's not going to happen by osmosis. You got to get in there. You got to dig in. Got to get in the trenches and get calluses on your freaking hands, Absolutely. Instead of using freaking hand lotion all day long and doing nothing. I mean, seriously, and that's where I came from.
Yeah, if you don't want to get your hands dirty, this is not the industry for you.
No. And if you're going to work from 9 to 5,
this is not the industry for you. You better go into bank. You better go into banking.
Forget. I mean, and it's so funny there when I decommissioned the second largest Ford PDC in the country, over 700,000 square feet, and we built another. We went from a PDC to an HVC, which was a high velocity center, which was not extended length material, but was everything under 48 inches. That's why they call it high velocity, because those parts move like very, very quickly, not compared to like rocker panels and quarter panels and hoods, all those extended type kind of things. And I literally worked around the clock while I was doing that, because I was trying to deplete inventory from a building I was decommissioning, and then I was trying to fill a new warehouse that was about 22 miles south of where I was. So I lived up in North Jersey. I was going into Teterboro to Cranberry, Cranberry to Teterboro, Teterboro to Cranberry back to my house, getting there at 2:00 in the morning, waking up at 5, going and having a conference with UAW at 5:30 in the morning for handoffs. Where are we at? Where we need to be? How come we're not there? Why? I mean, just like building those relationships, and with the president of the UAW, and stuff like that. I mean, this is absolutely downright trench work that you get your ass kicked in complexity. And once you get through that kind of stuff, everything else is gravy. Man. Everything else is, you got to, in logistics, you got to go hard. You got to go hard to understand what hard is. Because nothing is easy in this industry. And when you are like bent over backwards, you're aching, you just feel you can't do it anymore. You don't see your family. You don't get to go out on, vacations. You don't get to do that at all. And you're working around the clock. That's when you know whether you are made for logistics or not. That will make or break you. There's certain things in this industry that people just don't understand.
Yep, absolutely. You got to weather those storms to get through to the other side, and everything. As human beings, we always remember the bad times more than the good times, and so in supply chain, there's a lot of bad times, but it gives you experience, and you can build upon that experience to solve problems in the future and be ahead of it instead of behind it.
Yeah, that's how you learn.
I don't like being reactionary at all. I
No,
don't like being in that mode. But you see things over a span of time, and you go, okay, I'm fixing to implement this new project, and then you can think, okay, how many ways, in what ways can this thing go absolutely sideways? And then
correct.
you put things in place inside the process prior to execution that
Yes,
will mitigate those things before they become an issue. And the only real way to do that is to go in there and get experience and get to your point, get your butt kicked,
get it kicked.
get it
Get
kicked.
disciplined. You know what? I'm telling you, like one of the best bosses that I ever had, and I'll say his name here, Kevin O'Mara. He's a friend. He's a disciplinarian. He's a coach. He's a mentor. Um, he's a futurist. He's a thought provoker. He's on LinkedIn. If you're not following, you really should. That man kicked my ass and made me something I didn't never ever thought I could do. And that's when I was working for Snyder National. And then I went to Snyder Logistics and started up the first 4PL operation in Ford Motor Company's history. And then did a lot of, you know, best practices and mirror those practices at all the other PDCs that were out there. We went from 9 PDCs to 18 HVCs, and I launched a lot of them. I was on the road. I went out and helped other traffic managers and all that kind of stuff. And let me tell you, you know, it's great to get your ass kicked. It really is. It makes you into a person that you thought you were never going to be. It helps you to grow thick skin.
Kevlar, baby.
Teflon, yeah, definitely all the way. You know, I don't care. You know, a 50 millimeter bullet wouldn't go through my armor. I'm serious. It's just that you have to be able to put yourself in such an uncomfortable situation where you're either going to strive or die. There's no in between. That's the place that you need to be every single day. I say that wholeheartedly because that's where you're going to gain the most knowledge in order to help you to be successful in this industry. Sitting back and watching other people do it, you fail, man. You fail.
I posted earlier this week, a buddy of mine down in Texas, Robert Pogue. He always says, "Embrace the suck."
Oh
In
yeah,
this business, you better be able to embrace the suck.
yes, and all those sleepless nights.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised that, and I laugh. I'm surprised I still have hair in my head, and I got this sucker that's on here because I should actually be like bold and decrepit and everything because
What are
it
you
was
trying to
freaking
say, man?
painful, man. It was so painful.
What are you trying to say?
Hey, you got hair on your face. Come on, my
Yeah,
friend.
but I don't have any. Oh, this is gone, man. It is gone. I'm aerodynamic.
But no, but seriously, you know, adversity is excellent in this field. Um, I would recommend it not to every person, but that's why I like talking to people, you know, especially when they're thinking about coming into supply chain or logistics. You know, I like to see where their mindset is. You know, you're talking about reactionary type kind of visions. I always have a proactive mindset. I built that many years ago. The only way that you're able to get on top of an issue is to have that knowledge, like you said, John, and being able to predict the what ifs. The what
Yep.
if scenarios, you saw it in my post a gazillion times. I will not stop saying it, but the more you look at the what if scenarios proactively, I say that because there's a high probability in logistics that it's going to happen. You
That's
don't know
right.
when it's going to happen, but if you want to get ahead of the curve, you have to understand it by having that knowledge and being able to predict something. So when it does happen, you don't have to go into what John said about reactionary. You've already proactively looked at it. You went to the war room. You looked at all the possibilities that could happen. and you run that scenario and you run that scenario and you dive and you dive and you dive. And I say it constantly all the time. You will have the answers, most of the answers to that problem, and you'll be able to respond much quickly than anybody else because you looked at it.
Yeah,
Just don't go for, don't. That's why I said you gotta put yourself in a bad position in order to understand the probabilities of something going wrong. And it's not a good place to be, but it is, if that makes any sense. It really is.
Yeah, people say you need at least to have a plan B. Well, I'm at plan Q, and
I'm Z.
over the course of my career, I think I've passed plan Q a few times.
Yes, and the only way you get to that is not just listening, but this is the special word, listening with intent. Really
Right.
understand what's being said so that when you have your marching orders, you understand it like the back of your hand, and that
Right.
you can write everything down relatable to whatever was said that you absolutely understood, and you will help that person or that company out greatly. But just don't go into a meeting for the sake of having a meeting and, hi, I'm Jeff, hi, I'm John, and letting it be like that. Prepare yourself, prepare yourself. Go in there with pertinent questions that's relatable to their business, their facilities, their operations, and everything. You can't go in there blind. You have to have something in your pocket that will be thought provoking, that will make them think of something they've never thought of. That's hard. That's really hard, but it's going to send a shot across the bow that will be heard very, very loudly.
Yep.
That's the position you want to be in.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, I think we're getting close to the top of
Yes,
the hour, brother.
absolutely, absolutely. You know what? Great conversation, John. You know what? We're going to be talking about having some guests join us in the very near future, where we're going to most likely have conversations where we will agree to disagree and still be friends afterwards. But we're going to get into even more deeper weeds, because John and I feel that it's very important not just to share our knowledge, but share knowledge of other people who are even more experienced than us in subjects that we may not have dabbled in, but something that you need to know. So that's going to be in the future, and we'll make that happen.
Absolutely.
So everyone, thank you so much for joining this Old Doghouse Logistics podcast. We will be here next week at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on LinkedIn. Also want to thank our sponsor, Beta Consulting Group. If you're looking to market your company, you want to have a better brand and a better image, look up betaconsultinggroup.com. Those are the kind of guys that you need to go to. They will get the job done, and we appreciate them being on board with us. So with that said, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Until next time,